Carolyn Fowler's, and say, be really careful about that research question. Factors leading to the establishment. Yes, you're probably doing that. The other two, write me a statement of service performance. You're not really in 10, 12, even 15,000 words going to be able to talk about the influence of the AAFA on accounting research in Africa. How many million people did you say there were? Billion? Nor are you going to tell us about how you chart the course for a paradigm change in accounting research. But they could be goals, they could be part of your outcomes, and you could be trying to work out how you were going to measure that. And yeah, I think they are really big questions that need to be answered with a huge amount of all sorts of different data. So I think you're looking at social processes behind a learner society, the factors, the people, but obviously it's up to you what you do, but scoping it, really good project just for its own sake, but scoping it so that you can write something for the journal that's distinct and linking it into that scarce, finding your niche within that scarce literature. I see Katie has a, that's right, yes. Katie has a,
yeah. Please? Oh, Stephen, go ahead. You want to say something?
No. I'll wait for the comments and then I'll, yeah, sure, I'll respond.
Yinka,
okay. Thank you. Thank you. Let me just start off by asking whether you have asked the question, why was the formation of the society important?
Good question.
So Karen's correct in asking the question about the social context, the social processes. I am asking about the social context of establishing this. Also, because I know about the African Association of Management as a chapter of the International Association of Management. And what is it that makes this organization distinct from other organizations? Furthermore, I would want to know what is the relationship between AAFA and country-based accounting organizations and institutions of higher learning. So how does it interact with the plethora of accounting organizations as professional organizations and higher institutions of higher learning with AAF? So I think one should perhaps also consider the formation of this organization within the context of the professionalization literature, because so you're talking about the learned societies, but is this about a learned society, or is it part of the professionalization process of accounting in Africa? That's a question that I have. And the last thing is, how are you going to measure performance? Carolyn indicated that you're probably not going to get to that point in the paper, but if you say that you're going to measure performance, you've got to have clear benchmarks, and benchmarks that would be such that you can compare it with other similar organizations. So that's a question. But then in the end, the distance between you and other of your co-authors who've been involved in the organization and the paper will be mitigated through external reviews. So, you know, we could deal with that distance by submitting it to people who are distant from and will be able to review anonymously without having an interest in the organization, because many of the authors that you put forward are involved. But okay,
Absolutely.
so that's all I wanted to say now.
Thank you so much. Conan, one more hand here.
Yes, yeah, thank you for the presentation, and I think it's a really nice story to tell. And I think I'm gonna build on Getty, comment. So, for instance, on the continent, you have an association like Codesia, right? So it's CODERSIA. So you have, plethora of those kind of organizations. So I'm probably thinking of the intellectual structure of, the AFA as a learned society might be also an interesting angle, because other, intellectual grouping exists, and how they are structured, what is it that they're doing as a structured grouping, I think might be something that is interesting. So, but for now, I don't really see, because it's probably at the earliest stage of the reflection, I don't really see how you kind of, position AFA in this, project regarding other continental association, right? So I think this is important along the development of your idea. But I like the idea. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just a comment. Yeah.
Laura has a comment.
Yeah, I was wondering if in trying to reconstruct how these different positions and how this organization links with all the local organizations in the different regions of Africa. Maybe the usage of a social network theory might be helpful, and see how possibly this evolves throughout the most recent times. And in order to scope, for instance, some part of the social history that is behind a specific construction of a network behind the organization that you're studying. But this is just something that came on my mind, because in that way you can have a representation that can be mobilized and at the same time uses a method and a methodology that might provide something a little bit more concrete to your need to measure the performance. And in this case, I wouldn't consider performance as the actual accounting performance or influence, but certainly it might give an idea about the influence, just limited to the usage of this method.
No, excellent. Thank you so much. Tiven, you have a concluding points?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to start writing the paper in terms of response, but it was very useful. I appreciate very much the comment about social processes, and I think that's because in a sense it kind of perhaps connects more to the emergence and the thinking and the emergence and where it is now, much more around the social processes of how it stayed. Because there's a fantastic there's a sort of an anecdote of the first conference, and where we met someone who was from Ethiopia and said something like, "We tried this 10 years ago, it failed." So I remember that very strong kind of sentence. It failed, didn't work, it didn't survive. So we were thinking, yeah, it's probably going to end up with the same sort of outcome. So in a sense, it's a sort of a processes by which perhaps things are emerging and coming out much more where it is now. I also like the I think in a sense of the point about diaspora. I think there's a sort of perhaps difference here, perhaps compared to other sort of organization where maybe the effect of diaspora was perhaps more profound here than perhaps in other contexts. But that's probably one thing to elaborate a bit more, and how these therefore are influencing the way that perhaps we see what a professional. My personal view of what I agree, we don't call it a learner society. So my view of what AFA 10 years and now what it can do is very much influenced by that sort of in what is happening on the ground, what is happening in the different contexts and different countries in which we are operating. We have many members as well. The last point, it's the sheer size and often, what's the right word for this? The sheer size and opacity of organizations in Africa. I kid you not, Conan. Yesterday, I've heard this name, Codercia. It's only yesterday when I came across.
Wow, it's a big one. I can tell you,
it's a big one.
Yeah, absolutely.
It offers funding, I think, for diaspora.
Absolutely.
And I've never heard of it. And Danson picked it up and told me about it. So in a sense, there's a sort of, I mean, when it comes to whenever we discuss about organizations in Africa, there's a sort of size and opacity. You learn about a new organization in Africa every day. It's almost, and it's always a challenge. And in that case, but that's just an anecdote in passing, because you mentioned something I only heard about yesterday. So it was quite interesting. So thank you for. I think the comments are very good. I think there's needs a focus. The research question. The first one is in a sense seems to be sufficient enough, but in a sense, I like the. I will certainly be reading the one about the social processes and see how that can help progress with the paper. Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. We will come back to that. And I'm just probably we take 2 minutes and then we do the panel session. And the panel session basically is to get like all this all tied together. I think there was one question I am looking for an answer for is whether the 3 methods of data collection is applicable or anything for or against it historically, using personal reflection, archival data, and say if they all appear in one study, will it be applicable? Is it appropriate? Are there limitations you foresee?
I actually think
it's correct. You can use those 3 methods, but you have to ensure that you get access to the official documents of the organization.
Okay. Carolyn Fowler, you have to say something?
I was just going to say the more different sources you can use to triangulate against each other, the better the paper will be. Because, you need to, it just increases its reliability. And it's amazing what you find does not actually match. But yeah, the more the better when it comes to that sort of thing.
All right, thank you so much. I think maybe if we're feeling like it, before we get everybody very tired, let's go to the panel session, which is more like where we tie everything together. And the panel session is just to give one more opportunity for any question or any sort of feedback that people didn't get the chance to ask directly or during the presentation didn't come through. We can now put that in now. I'm not sure whether I'm sharing this screen properly, but let me see.
Oh, I think I've started to share my screen, hopefully.
Okay, fine, that's even good. If you're sharing your screen.
Oh, I'm just not sure though. Is it working, Carolyn?
It's coming.
Yeah, it's working.
Okay.
Just a minute before you share your screen, if you don't mind, I will just sort of give a quick 1 minute sort of introduction. Do you mind if I share mine?
Oh.
Okay. So the panel session, I'm sure we've seen the rundown. We've got our 3 editors from the journal who would be our speakers, and we have heard from Carolyn. So I'll just introduce the 2 other speakers, and I'm sure we already know them, but just in terms of, a quick rundown. Professor Caroline Caudry is the chair of the New Zealand Accounting Standard Board and a member of the Australian Accounting Standard Board, and a practitioner advisory group of the IFR. Caroline, you talk about this more. IFR non-for-profit. Okay, that's the IFR for not-for-profit project, International Financial Reporting for Non-Profit Organization. And Caroline has undertaken quite a lot of commissioned research. She's very much in the not-for-profit sector, but as well, very, very involved in public sector and accounting history research. Hence the reason she is one of the joint editors of the journal. Professor Caroline is a fellow of the Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand, and she's also a fellow of CP Australia and New Zealand. And I think last year we were there when you were honored as well, as you received the New Zealand President Award for your contribution to CP Australia and New Zealand. So thank you so much for being for coming to speak on the panel. And I'll quickly introduce Laura, and then we'll have all of you talk to us at the same time. And Associate Professor Laura Moran is an Associate Professor in Management Accounting at RMIT University Australia. She's involved in the enhancement of higher education programs of accountants. Before joining RMIT in 2012, Laura worked in private and public sector in Italy. In the past 10 years, or for about 10 years, Laura has published in accounting history and public sector accounting. Most of her work appear in AAAFA and other leading accounting journal. So Laura is also one of the joint editors of the Accounting History Journal. And Laura, thank you for being on the panel as well. And we had the opportunity of listening to Caroline, so I wouldn't go into much detail, but just a reminder as well that Caroline is also one of the joint editors, and with experience that we will draw from in addition to what she spent time to talk to us earlier on. So I think we can go into the panel properly. What we have agreed is to have everybody have an opening statement for maybe about 5 minutes, and then we come back and take questions. So Caroline Caudry, the floor is yours now.
I'm not sure that that's what we've agreed at all, Yinka. What we have is a little presentation where we're going to talk about guidance on publishing and accounting history, and I think that this could be useful for people, and we'll flick through it as quickly as we can. It's a very because it's 3 o'clock in the morning here, so some of us are almost asleep, but we're going to basically, so for people that are very experienced in publishing, you might go, well, we've heard all this before, but my experience is you go to a conference and people always want to go and talk to the editors and hear the story. So we're going to talk about the processes and the expectations of what happens when you submit your work to the journal, and then how the review process works, and how we would move to acceptance and publication, and then take your questions. So why would you choose accounting history? Well, or what would you do? And I think the whole thing is that you really need to pick the journal that's right for your paper. And so I've got some questions here. Is your work within the scope of the journal? And I know Caroline will tell you what the scope is when she gets to her slide. Do you find the papers in the journal interesting to read? You know, are there some things there that you go, oh, I'd be interested in that? And more practically, when you're thinking about your paper, are you citing work from the journal? So we're trying to continue a conversation that's going on in the journal. It's not just a process that you go through to find a paper that you have to cite. There is a conversation going on. When you're thinking about submitting your research, follow the guidelines, please, about how you set out your paper and things. And I've got those, I think, on the next slide. write us a little cover letter, but don't just tell us what's in your abstract. Why do you think that we should get past the abstract to read your paper and then to move the paper through the review process? And that's, I guess, some ideas about why you might want to submit it. But if we thinking about why we would want to look at accounting history, here's perhaps some more detail about, okay, I want to publish an accounting history. We have 22 editor's choice collections on our website. So they range from religion and accounting, to name a topic that I enjoy, to banking and accounting history, to agriculture and accounting history, 22 of them. Go off, have a look at those collections. We always make one collection free for 3 months of the year. So you might be lucky, you might be able to get access to all the papers if you don't normally have access to accounting history. But there is, normally a synopsis, and we're going through and updating those on a continuous basis. So one every 3 months, or use the search bar within the website to find papers. Look for special issues that are on your topic. Get in touch with their guest editors to see if you can, which is of course what you've done here. Get in touch with Reiki and Yenka. And then we also have symposia within the special interest group of AFANs, which would enable you to present again. So as you develop these papers, you could see if you can present them at a virtual workshop in December, which AFANs would be having. So there's some suggestions for trying to find those papers that I've said are important to cite and to read as part of the preparing your paper. Here is the scope of accounting history. It's a specialist journal. We want to look at the nature, the roles, the uses and impacts of accounting. And you can see this is just a picture of a snip of the website with the aims and the scope. The editorial board, you might well recognize, hopefully you do recognize some of the names in the editorial board, and the submission guidelines, which are really important to fill out. I'll come back to those. Other parts of our website, I said to you about the special issues. Today's virtual workshop is here on our website at the moment, the Sage website. And here's the editor's choice collections that you would be able to find those 22 different editor's choice, and the little search bar that we talked about, finding those. So what do we require when you actually get around to putting your whole paper in, rather than just thinking about an abstract for today's workshop? 2 files in Word, probably. One is a title page with the names and addresses, not their home addresses, but university addresses of your co-authors. And so that's not anonymized, right? It's got your names on it. And then an anonymized file that starts with the title of the paper, but doesn't have any names on it. That will have the abstract and so on as there. We use endnotes, not footnotes, in accounting history. 1.5 spacing. I know it says 2 on the website, but we're getting that changed. Try and put it all into one document. It does make it easier, and give us some keywords. We use the Sage Harvard reference style, so do make sure that you follow that. And here's a little picture with a smiley face on it. What actually happens when you submit this paper, which you have formatted beautifully and has all the right referencing and so on? You can see here on the flowchart, it will come to one of the editors, one of the 3 of us. And we will read the paper, we'll read your letter. And from there, and I know Lara's going to go into this in slightly more detail, we will send it to 2 reviewers. And there's 2 things that will happen. One is we could desk reject it, so it's not at all suitable for the journal. And we do get a number of those papers every year where you know, the current capital markets ideas about dividends or whatever. So, you know, that they're not at all on topics that that are historical. But as long as we think it's within scope, we will send it to 2 reviewers who then give us comments and make some recommendations which we think about, and we will then either go back to the author, back to you, and say, please make some revisions, or I'm sorry, the paper is, you know, the reviewers do not like the paper, and neither do we. So we'll, you know, we will make some suggestions for submitting it to another journal. On the first round, it's very unlikely that we would accept it, but at some point the paper hopefully will be accepted and published. So that's an overview of the process. I think at this point I'm going to hand over to Lara, and so here she is.
Yeah, this slide is to tell you how careful is the decision from the editors in terms of the reviewers that might impact on the review process and on the length of the review process in itself. We have started an important keywords project involving the journal, in which we are trying to improve the match that generally will think through in terms of the paper that is submitted, its own topics, period of reference, theoretical stance or approach, the methodology, with the choice of the reviewers that should not only match in terms of these or at least one of these criteria, but we are very attentive also in order to identify the academic seniority of these reviewers, the gender balance to ensure, and to ensure also to improve the skills of our early researcher scholars or reviewers that have been added to the journal with a less academic seniority. Of course, we are going also to evaluate the timely response, but the editors do not only evaluate these. They have got also a very important role in the moment in which the reviews comes back, and the editors have to evaluate those reviews before elaborating a decision, because in any case the reviewers are formulating a recommendation to the editors, and the editors need to balance those recommendations with respect to their own view over the paper, what is expressed within the reviews, and in general, if there are doubts and so on, the editors tend to involve also associate editors for strategic purposes of a final decision. Now, there are some headaches that can happen, and some headaches that can happen might involve the fact that, for instance, reviewers that are initially invited never reply to the invitation or tend not to reply to the invitation, and then they are chased. But of course, this has got impact on the length of the review process, or otherwise they have accepted the invitation, but they are very late in submitting the review. Sometimes we have got papers that have got split reviews, and therefore might necessitate of a third reviewer that should be brought into the review process. Sometimes it might happen that one of the 2 reviewers that initially involved themselves into the process actually have to drop from the process, and even in that case, another reviewer need to be added. Or there are conflicts of interest that are becoming really evident in the moment in which the reviews are coming on the desk of the editors. For instance, a reviewer that wants to bend the project that he is reading to its own agenda, and this requires often not only an open discussion among the editors, but also the choice of a potential moderating reviewer. So if you are feeling that it has been passed a lot of time since you have submitted and you are seeking for feedback and so on, take into consideration that we are giving the maximum priority to this, but unfortunately headaches might happen, and we'll try to do our best to ensure the quality of the review process and the quality of the improvement that we require. Of course, sometimes our authors are shocked by the reviews that they have received, because it might be that the expected feedback are requiring a lot of work for the authors, and sometimes they feel that the authors might feel that the reviewer hasn't actually has missed the point. And it is always a good suggestion to wait for a few days before bringing back the review and try to respond clearly to all the different points. As we know, and this is pretty straightforward, the results from a review round might be still a reject if both reviewers think that the paper is either not within the scope of accounting history, or there is a big gap and lack of contribution for which it cannot proceed. Otherwise, we might have two results, like major revision or revise and resubmit, in which the feedback are extensive, a major revision of the article is required, or a little bit more than a major revision is required, although the article has got potential to be published. In both cases, the paper needs to be revised quite substantially, and the editors will send it out for review. Then hopefully in the second round or in the third round, if the paper has processed throughout the review process and the reviewers are content with the way in which the comments have been addressed, the reviews come back with minor concerns that requires a minor revision from the authors. And in that case, there is a recommendation for publication, and submitted to these minor revisions, and the editor might decide in that case that the paper doesn't go back again to the reviewers. In the case of conditional acceptance, as soon as the authors have addressed the minor revisions, the editors decide to bring it to the acceptance part. In our experience, which are the main red flags on which the authors might need to pay attention? So these red flags that are in the 6 hexagonals here may concern the methodology. So whenever the way in which the variables or the elements or assumptions are operationalized within the contribution of the paper is not clear. It is not clear how the evidence has been collected or pulled together. All these problems that concerns the methodology are important problems, especially in a journal like Accounting History, in which papers rely quite a lot on archival sources or either oral histories and so on. Organization, so structure of the ideas within the paper is also quite important. We have seen, for instance, submissions where the order between theoretical framework and findings was completely reversed. The relevance of following a structure is also something that will play in favor of the authors in the moment in which the reviewers actually understand how the authors have decided to organize their own idea. In terms of contribution or relevance, This is also a very important point that recalls very much the presentation of Caroline at the beginning of this workshop. It is important that the paper connects with a debate that characterizes the journal. And this debate or this positioning allows for the paper to claim where it adds value to the current knowledge that we have got in accounting history. The lack of addressing this contribution is often one of the reasons for which reviewers will give major revisions or revise and resubmit. In terms of language, it might seem a secondary or not really relevant issue, but as a matter of fact, for a reviewer, reading a paper that does have a lot of grammatical errors or really doesn't make sense because it has been a literal translation from another language, for instance, without an understanding of or without using correct English expressions is something that might again compromise the future of the paper in itself. And unfortunately, we've got more than one of these cases. Although accounting history is a very open journal in terms of international contribution, and we try to improve and help the voice or the different voices, international voices to be there, still it is necessary. It is necessary to pay attention to at least a grammatically correct language. The literature review is strictly connected to the contribution that the paper and the significance that the paper intend to make. So please do not forget to link to the debate, the extant debate in the literature. And finally, there are potential other problems that might regard other parts of the paper. Dealing with reviewers is not easy. We understand that, but it is also important that all the different points are addressed and not dismissed. The authors may decide to rebut some of the concerns raised by the reviewers, and that's perfectly acceptable, but this doesn't mean that the points that are made by the reviewers shouldn't be addressed. Be prepared for the negative, but at the same time, don't be discouraged because clearly the reviewers are paying a lot of attention to how the authors have addressed their points. And just try to stay positive and do the very best for your work and for the improvement towards publication. Of course, we all had rejections, either desk rejections or rejections from the reviewers. The best advice that we can give here is that generally rejections are accompanied by very detailed comments, and still that is a learning exercise that the authors may take on board when going with patience, going through those comments and try to use them for an improved version of or a completely different version of the paper that can be resubmitted as a new submission to the same journal or to another journal. And now I think I pass to Caroline.
Pass to me, yes, and I am still awake, which is quite surprising. So following on from what Lara and Caroline said, when this kind of thought it'd be useful just to flick through what happens once I or one of the other editors push the accept button. And so the first thing that's going to happen is can you push the button, Carolyn? I forgot, I'm not in charge. is that you're going to get an acceptance email that's system generated, but I may have written something in it. And then you will be asked to fill in a contributors form, which is you do it online, and it gives a copyright waiver to Sage, the publisher. Now, if you get to the stage, and I'm hoping all of you will, make sure you check the title before you sign it. Because once you sign it, we have all sorts of problems if we want to change the title. After we've done that, we go into a copy editing process where an editor or an associate editor will copy edit your article. And that's to ensure it's in journal style, and also to check that it really hasn't had any substantial rewrites between when the reviewers accepted it. A lot of the time we will actually send it back to you for further clarification or information, or as Lara said, occasionally we send it back to you to basically get it proofread or that sort of thing, because it's the translation in most cases hasn't been done well enough for the journal. And then the production editor, which currently is me, will submit the article to the publisher. And once it goes to the publisher, we get a final proof, and that will be sent direct to you by Sage. Now, this is your last chance, once you get the final proof, to check that, check it carefully for errors, and then I will review it and sign off the final proof. Now, common mistakes that I spend a lot of time fixing, a sentence structure and grammar, or the copy editors, not using UK spelling, centuries should be in words, not numbers. We don't use a double quote. We actually use a single quote mark. We have a gap in percent. Our in-text references are alpha. And the thing that drives me the most nuts, and ask my fellow editors how wound up I get about it, is not following the journal style with references. Because it takes a while to go through and double, triple check those. So it does help if you've at least had a go. Once the proofs are signed off by production editor, the article will appear on the journal website on the online first. You want to push the button, Carolyn, because I think there's an animation there. And that's where it will see it. Then we decide what volume and issue it goes in, and then it will appear on the current issue. And then once it's not the current issue, it'll appear in the all issues. So we publish 4 issues a year, generally between 6 and 8 articles in each. Now the one question I do get is, well, how long between when we tell you we accepted, and then it depends on online first. The answer to that is depends. It can be several months. It really depends on where it falls in the year and the length of the copy edit process. So following the journal style and producing a high quality, well-written article reduces the processing time. So sort of coming back to what Yenka was saying, so where to with my proposed article for the special issue, I have sat here and listened to everything tonight, this morning, tonight, this afternoon. And I have, with some work, I think everything I've seen has the potential to be part of a special issue on Africa. There is some really interesting papers, very promising proposals, and extended abstracts covering a great range of topics, locations, you know, different theoretical positioning, different time period. I would encourage in future research for you to think about how you could actually look at accounting in Africa pre-colonization. Now, you might say, well, I don't have the data, but the data doesn't actually have to be written data. It can be physical artifacts. There's been some quite good Swedish work on tally sticks. There's been some really good stuff in Sri Lanka on tablets and inscriptions and things like that. So not something you might want to think about now, but in the future, having a look at pre-colonization Africa and if and what types of accounting were there. As I said, there's been, I mentioned the temples in Babylon, but I do know that Muhammad Ismail did some really quite nice stuff on accounting in ancient Egypt as well. Getting advice, talk to your discussant would be most, I think all of us really enjoyed your papers and would be willing to give you a bit of a hand. Look at the editor's choice collections, you know, look at who's on the editorial board, and if they're in your area of research, drop them an email, and contact authors of papers that have the most relevance for your project. And I'd just like, before we go into questions and comments, I'd just like to thank Yinka and Koki for organising this symposium. For those that are still online, for participating in it, the presentation and the presenters for doing an excellent job of presenting their work. And so I'll just hand it back to Yinka to manage any questions or comments.
Thank you so much. I think you've all brought out the key things. Now it's really open to the floor first, but questions from anybody here? Oh, okay. My wouldn't be a question, but like a clarification. Caroline, you mentioned in your presentation that you have a timeline, even though it's not, okay, I'll take this one. Somebody who joined in my name, but I think it's the link I gave. We'll take this first and we come back. Okay. So yeah, can you please go ahead?
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry, I'm surprised I'm seeing your name. I didn't know.
No, it's the link I shared, because every registered link will have the same.
Okay.
Don't worry about it. But you
All
can
right,
just
thank you.
introduce yourself so that we get it properly.
Okay, my name is Jerry from Nigeria specifically. I actually joined late, but I think I took part of the last presentation. Wanted to ask just few questions regarding the presentation. Number one, the reduction rate for the paper. I didn't know if that was mentioned, because I was going to, she said in each issue is about 6 to 8 papers per issue. And I'm just imagining a lot of people writing papers, how many rejected. So that indicate a very high rate of rejection rate. And also that may also inform us about the quality of the papers. So I just want to confirm from her.
So the most of the papers that we reject, many of the papers that we reject are because they are not within the scope of the journal. Accounting history is ranked A in the ABDC list, and so we get a lot of papers that come in, as I said, that are not at all about history, and so they get rejected by the editor. Basically, that's my job, and you know, people just send papers off willy-nilly without looking at the scope. When we get serious papers that are on accounting history, so telling you, you know, how many we reject is not actually that useful, because you don't know how many are not in scope. When we get good accounting history papers, when we get accounting history papers that are serious, that have, you know, proper data and methods and are linked through, at least we can see the thread. Then we work with authors. Now, I'm not saying we accept everything that's accounting history, because it is a well-ranked journal, and you know, authors need to do the work as well, not just the editors. But certainly, if we can see promise, then we will send it out to reviewers, so at least get you that feedback from the reviewers. If in the end, you know, it's not salvageable at that point, then we may have to reject it at that point. As Lara said, sometimes we will say, we're going to reject this, but you can resubmit a totally new paper on the same topic. That's, you know, that's sort of a halfway in between having a reject and having a revise. But actually, sometimes we can see promise, but we don't think that the current, you know, the reviewers and ourselves don't think that it's promising as it is, and you need to go back to the drawing board a bit more. So yes, we reject papers. Yes, because we have a high quality journal, but most of them are because the papers are out of scope. Many of them are because the papers are out of scope.
Okay, just two more again. The second one is does it mean that we need to do more qualitative writing instead of quantitative?
We publish both quantitative and qualitative papers. So Carolyn covered that in her first in her plenary at the beginning of this session.
Oh, sorry about that. Then the last one, sorry, sir. The last one is sorry, I came late, so maybe most of you guys have been addressed. The fee for acceptance, will it be paid?
There is no fee.
No.
Okay, fantastic. All right.
It's free to submit and free to keep resubmitting until we publish it.
Yeah.
All right.
It's not I don't know. Do you have for those who want to go, what do we call it? You do
open access.
Open
There
access.
is a fee for open access.
Yeah.
But that's managed by Sage. That's not
managed by Sage. So if when your article's been accepted and we get through the final proof, then if you tell me you've got funding or you want to pay for open access, I will just email through to the publisher and they will directly contact you. And a lot of universities in New Zealand and Australia now are funding open access. So we've got a few now online that are open access. So yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I don't know how much it is.
No, it's not even a worthwhile venture, but hopefully anybody who wants to take that route. But just before we round up, if there are no questions come, I'm just saying more broadly, I think we've all touched on this, but looking at the interest or looking at the journal really pitching towards African community and African region, do you see, and I think you've talked about this, but do you see what sort of practical behind this, what kind of practical support or how do you help to facilitate? A lot of issues will matter, and it's not really related to this special issue. People will do normal track submission. What are the mechanics, or what are you thinking? Or maybe it's not ready yet on the table. How do you think you want to support African scholars in that direction as a journal? And it may not be the answer today or 1 minute, and it's not necessarily for the special issue because it's a different thing, but I think people may start thinking about coming to accounting history to send in their work. Are you thinking about something that really will be targeted at the region? I'm not sure if I probably have.
Well, I think that one of the initiatives is the possibility to have the workshop supported by the journal within the scope of the journal, and as you have seen from the slides, also advertised throughout the website of the journal, which means that the journal demonstrate an interest towards the improvement and the voice of this particular geographical and cultural region that is very complex in itself. This is not the only initiative, because thanks to the idea of Caroline Fowler, we are also trying to gather together the different national traditions according to cultural and geographical regions. So everything is a part, I think, of the personality of the journal, that is an interdisciplinary but also a truly international journal, because it gives a voice to potential voices that are not heard or heard only partially in other journals, as long as the paper submitted has got a historical flavor and also linkages with the accounting discipline. I think that the role of yourself and Professor Verhoef will be also fundamental, because as guest editors, you are in this privileged position to be able to help out those who are in the process of targeting the special issue to really reach a draft proposal, sorry, a draft paper that can be submitted.
Thank you so much, Laura. Yes, sir. And I think you've just answered to that. And I think both Caroline Fowler and Caroline Cordry have indicated. I've just got a text. Somebody have just also said, how can we offer mentorship in that direction? And I think that's the kind of question. And I think once we find those people who want to do this research or do something in that space, we'll bring them and see how within the editorial board we can find somebody who can either, if it's a reasonable and worthwhile project, they are worked. It's that vision of really they are kind of like mentored through the project, because as we see from how Caroline even helped widen our thinking about the space of accounting research, not many people in the room do this or even understand it. So that really support is what I was really seeking for. And I think you mentioned it. That's part of the spirit here. And it's just saying that the individual mentorship or somehow support, which is not necessarily as a policy, but at an individual level, people who have space and capacity within the editorial board may be happy to walk through projects as they come.
And don't undervalue the role of the reviewers, because throughout their reviews, they are actually helping out a lot to bring a paper to a quality level for publication. And they are doing all of that for free, mainly, and for the benefit of our community.
Excellent. I think it's past our bedtime a lot, but it's really been very exciting and helpful. I've got very positive comments, both in my email, private message, and some of them that you can see. Everybody is very thankful to you three and all the team behind it. So
well, thank you both for organizing this and the special issue. And I just echo what Carolyn said and Lara, and we're looking forward to lots of interesting papers coming through and the work that you're going to do, and happy to help. And we encourage you, all the authors on their work. I know people who perhaps aren't online will be listening to this later, and we're looking forward to seeing those studies come to fruition. So at 3:30 in the morning, some of us might go to bed and try and get some sleep before Saturday gets too much older.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And Cricket, do you want to say the final word? I think you're still on the call, but otherwise, yes, I think from here you get comms from me once we have the video recording ready. But the video, just for clarification, it's the first part and the panel session that will be available. The individual paper presentation may not be available, but I'm happy to give each presenter on demand just to see what comments they were giving. But we'll provide people with the more keynote presentation and the panel session. All right, thank you everyone, and it's
Bye.
been absolute pleasure. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, team.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yinka.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inka.
Thank you, Inka.
Bye.
Thank you very much.